Start rolling. Okay, should we just give another minute? I think we should just give it another minute because I see more folks jumping on. So we'll give our customers another moment or so.
Sure.
3 minutes past the hour, and I'll go ahead and get started.
Krim, just let me know when you want to move through the slides, okay?
You bet. You bet. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Awesome. So, first of all, let me thank all the customers out there who are joining us today. I know you have very, very busy schedules, and we really, truly appreciate you taking the time to, come in and talk to us about one very, very important part of your network that you need to be looking at, which is your data protection and storage. So, quick introduction first. So, my name is Kareem Ramu. And I manage the hybrid cloud solution architecture team for Eastern Canada, as well as the cloud native team right across Canada, which is on the national side. And one of the things that my team is seeing a significant amount of is requests from our customers because of what's happening out there in the cyber landscape, where there are constant threats coming in from malware and actors and those who are looking to exploit your network and actually grab a hold of one of the most important assets you have, which is your data. So let's go ahead and the next slide there. So, thank you, Paul. So, yeah, awesome. So just a quick little blurb. I won't take too much time. I want to get right into the crux of it. Like I said, it's a very, very important topic. So just a quick blurb on CDW. We are a leading IT solutions provider, and just as full disclosure, I've only been with the company about a year and a half, and prior to that, I was with Cisco, and I've seen a significant evolution at CDW. We brought on through acquisition or through homegrown services a really amazing services team, right? And so, and by the way, we are in many different countries. Of course, our head office out in the U.S., all of continental United States, as well as Canada and in the UK and different parts of Europe. Let's go on to the next quick slide. So here's a little kind of timeline of CDW. And when I say, the last 5 years, you can see where our evolution was. So we had a bit of that kind of fairy tale start, right, with our founder, Michael Krasny, who started off the company kind of in a small garage, if you will, and of course grew that into this massive, amazing organization that has basically end-to-end services that it can provide to you, the customers. And that includes everything from risk assessment to the services that my team provides, which is the infrastructure of enterprise networks, routing, switching, wireless, data center, as well as cloud native stuff. And then, as you can see, where we came in, where my team came in, is kind of at that top end with the acquisition of Scalar that brought in a breadth of services into the company, and we're just more than thrilled to be part of the journey with you. With that, I will hand this over to Paul and kick off. Oh, actually, no, we have one more slide.
You have more.
This one. So yeah, so this is kind of the experience that you can trust slide. Right? So this is how many years of experience we have, our local presence. I kind of touched on all this stuff. You can see where we rank in the Fortune 500. Our net sales in 2018. I think there's even more up-to-date slide that takes us there. But as you can see, we are well entrenched and well capable to be able to provide our customers with outstanding service. Now over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Kareem. Appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Paul Mitchell. Good afternoon, good morning. Depends on which territory you're in this morning or this afternoon. I'm actually one of the field CTOs aligned here to the Dell Data Protection Business Unit, and happy to present, obviously, with our partner CDW around Apex Backup Services, which will address a lot of the things that Kareem has mentioned about as well. So happy to be here. And again, thanks for the opportunity for us to go through a couple of different things. I've actually been here at Dell for 12 plus years, and I've gone through many acquisitions and mergers just like CDW, but happy to provide obviously some continuance and around the platform. So I want to spend a little bit of time here really talking around Apex Backup Services, which is a fairly new initiative. It's something that I personally have been working on for 2+ years here at Dell. It is one of the larger initiatives around particular backup and really giving customers a choice into doing something slightly different to address not only just mitigation of risk, but also to avoid things like some sort of compromise as well around different services. So if you look at really from a Dell perspective, and again, looking at this from a data protection portfolio, we give a lot of customers a little bit of different choices on which direction they want to take the strategy. Whether they're actually looking at leaning into moving, obviously, technology from on-premise, from the private cloud to a public cloud provider, irrespective of which one it is, whether it's Amazon, Google, Azure, or any others, it doesn't really make any difference for us. But we obviously have technology choices when it comes to things around really cloud enablement and cloud extension. So whether that's actually from traditional on-premise environments into the cloud, or obviously from the cloud back out, addressing obviously business operations, recovery operationals, and then things like, for example, cyber recovery, as well as risk mitigation as well. We obviously have a lot of different things in our portfolio to do also around software defined. So if you want to run the same technology into those cloud providers, you can do that. But today's conversation will really be around the last category here, which is around the software as a service. So if you look at really the initiatives in the industry right now, are things like from a software as a service or a SaaS perspective, leading the charge in the way is things like, for example, Microsoft M365, Google Workspace, and Salesforce. And really, as much as they're in the cloud, despite what people think, because they are in the cloud, and I'll use my bunny ears today to talk about quotes, it is obviously that they still need to be protected, and we'll talk a lot about that today. But really, where I'm introducing Apex Backup Services, that Apex Backup Services is a SaaS-based control plane. So it changes the modeling somewhat in the sense that we're now providing a SaaS control plane to provide backup operational services for things like M365, Google Workspace, and Salesforce, as well as other things, things like Endpoint. So things like laptops, desktops, think like Android, iOS devices, and then also the ability to protect workloads irrespective of their location. And we call that hybrid workloads, and we'll cover those today. But this really does shift the model in the sense that it moves from a traditional capital expenditure to an operational expenditure, because now you can consume this obviously based on whatever that you need. So do you want to protect M365? Do you want to protect Google? Do you want to protect some file services or VMware or something? You have the choice, and you can license accordingly. The modeling works differently in the sense that you're now paying for what you consume. So that's really metered on a monthly basis based on cloud economics of really what you're consuming, and then invoiced accordingly, whether you want to pay for it yearly, 3-yearly, 5-yearly, whatever. But it's really around really positioning the approach to giving customers a choice of whichever direction they want to go into. So why Apex Backup Services, and one fundamentally why SaaS? Well, because it gives you a lot of flexibility, right? A lot of customers are actually coming to us and they're asking us, look, we just want to back up to the cloud. We're not really interested in infrastructure too much. We don't want to manage infrastructure. Maybe we have a diverse environment where we're actually having manufacturing today, or we have edge locations today that have been out of the scope of protecting those things because effectively, it's been too costly, or it's just been too very basically from a manpower perspective. How do I manage those things and become very complex? So having a platform that is SaaS driven mitigates a lot of different things. Obviously, things like updates are pushed to you dynamically. The ability to push new capabilities to a platform very quickly without you having to do the upgrades is becoming very compelling for a lot of customers. You can actually deploy this platform very quickly. We'll talk about it. We have a customer right now that started a proof of concept last week with us. Actually happened to be doing protecting M365. We can have the conversation of why you need to protect the M365, and happy to come back and do that obviously on an individual basis. But it is a really driving factor, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But that customer was able to back up their M365 basically in 47 minutes from initial acquisition of the product itself after some hardening. You're obviously getting a consistent experience. Again, customers are getting what they want. And again, this is really driven from a cloud native service, which is really part of Dell's larger Apex initiative. consuming things as a service, right? So Apex Backup Services, there's that first offering in the data protection scope. There will be other services coming this year as well. But again, we talk about it being where it is, and we'll talk about full disclosure where the platform lives. And lastly, but not least, it's very scalable, and then lastly, very secure, because that's always the top ask for customers. Well, I'm putting this stuff in the cloud now. Dell, you're managing this for me. Absolutely. But, there are some things that we need to address, and we'll talk about those during today's session. So Apex Backup Service, again, is really driven from a SaaS control plane. The ability to centralize management of different applications, whether that's endpoints, whether that's SaaS applications, or traditional on-premise hybrid workloads, it's very easy to do. Obviously, as an end-to-end solution, Dell is managing this, obviously, in conjunction with CDW to be able to actually acquire the solution. But we're actually going to market together to obviously provide a solution like this, whereas obviously you purchase it, we support it, and we obviously maintain that. It is obviously the ability to obviously secure it even further, but to be very clear, this is something that you, the customer, are still responsible for the operational backups. You're still going to define schedules and retentions and where you deploy things. There are going to be some software components that would need to be deployed, typically things like data movers. So things like, for example, proxies for VMware or agents for some things like file services or endpoints. You have the ability to do that. But you break the model in the sense that you're getting away from having traditionally managed storage on-premise and or basically technology, because this platform is, again, from beginning to end or soup to nuts. We're providing a control plane, the deduplication technology, the security, the underlying architecture, and lastly but not least, the storage as well. So again, it is a single point solution that allows you to acquire what you need and license as you need. We're providing a virtual air gap. Well, what does that mean? That could be open to a lot of different interpretation. But ultimately, if you talk about things like Microsoft M365, and again, this is where I'll open up the kimono, for want of a better word, to discuss this a little bit further. This platform is actually built on microservices that happen to be residing in the AWS cloud, okay? So when we're talking about things like Microsoft M365, we're creating an air gap. We're actually creating a virtual air gap by taking data from Azure, so Microsoft Azure, where M365 sits in, and we're putting it into AWS on your behalf as a truly managed tenant. That provides air gap. It provides the ability to do out-of-place discovery, out-of-place, obviously, things like legal hold and compliance, as well as obviously to do things like out-of-place recovery. And we'll show that a little bit later on today. It is using encryption in motion. So again, AES 256 to do that. And also the data is encrypted at rest. And you, the customer, are the ones that are responsible for the encryption keys. Dell has no interest into it. CDW has no interest into it. And lastly, AWS has no interest into it in any shape or form. So the encryption keys are rotated on a control plane that is obviously managed, and you, the customer, are responsible for that. The platform does inherit zero trust. So things like HIPAA, ITAR, SOX, all those different compliancy requirements that you have. And in fact, is also FedRAMP certified as well for certain workloads as well, if that's a requirement. The fact is that this is different, obviously, in the sense that it is obviously a subscription model, central control plane to be able to manage those things. And because it is built on the AWS cloud, we have the ability to provide a lot of different flexibility in where you locate your data. So today we support actually 16 different geographical regions. And I know a lot of people are obviously are asking the question, I have a sovereignty requirement. I need to keep the data in Canada. Well, the answer is absolutely. So one of those 16 regions is actually Montreal. So you can actually elect to choose to keep your data in Montreal so it doesn't have to transition the border into the United States. Or if you're managing a multi-glomerate configuration that has global entities, like, for example, in the US or in the UK, you can actually manage those data sets and keep sovereignty by keeping the data locally to a region that makes sense to them. I've touched on the legal hold things. We'll get into that a little bit further when we get into the product. But one of the other things that a lot of customers ask around this platform is, well, what about it's in the cloud? What about egress and transaction costs? Well, again, this is all included in the platform. So you don't see, or you never will see, an egress bill from Dell or from CDW or from AWS to basically show you that you've pulled data out from a recovery standpoint. Now, there are some disclaimers on that when you're obviously, if you're backing up stuff from another cloud, like, for example, Azure or Google, for example, then obviously there potentially could be some egress for those providers, but pulling data out of the platform is basically all included to this. So again, backup M365, backup some file servers. You pull the data out from a restore, you're never going to see an egress or or basically a transaction cost bill from us for that basically perspective. So again, just in a nutshell, very simple SaaS control plane to provide backup services for SaaS applications, hybrid workloads, and endpoints and desktops accordingly. So going through really, looking at why things need to be done differently. Well, if you're looking at things like SaaS-based applications, most customers perceive that because it's in the cloud, it's protected. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, that's not quite the case. Microsoft does its best to obviously keep the service up and running. But again, Microsoft M365 or Google Workspace or Salesforce are very much internet-based services. And, Karim and I were talking a little bit before this, but it's amazing to understand now that because M365 are basically really pretty much a series of services that depend on lots of different things, like for example Active Directory, or they are in fact an internet-based service, they're becoming a very large attack vector right now. So it doesn't take very much long. If you've got some folks on the call today that are having to manage M365, they would probably know the significance of the global admin role. Well, the global admin role is really a kind of gotcha in the sense that it is all powerful, yes. From a best practice, you want to kind of use that as least as possible. And then obviously from that standpoint, there are compromises that people are trying to attack on those kind of principles. And one of the things that really is nice about this platform is we do not require, and I will emphasize that again, we do not require the global admin role to be able to continue to do backup services for M365. We can protect Salesforce. We can protect Google Workspace. Again, simple licensing conversation from the same control plane. Do you want to be able to get some visibility and compliance around that? Do you want to be able to look in things like OneDrive? Do you want to look in Exchange? Do you want to look in Teams and SharePoint? Are you looking for data that shouldn't be in that environment? Are you subject to things like GDPR, right? So you have to have emphasis on looking for data. Do I look in someone's OneDrive and find a document that has some content? Am I looking for things like sensitive data? So, here I'm in the Chicagoland area, but in the United States, social security numbers are a big number, or a big thing that obviously people are looking for. Bank account numbers, credit card numbers, are they in backup sets? Should they even be there? And obviously this is where the value of this platform basically comes into play. Very much a cloud to cloud API perspective. So, there's no gateways or servers that need to be deployed to be done this. And this is very different from a lot of other competitive solutions out there. We are very much doing an API approach to be able to protect SaaS applications. So think about it as a cloud to cloud native data protection capability. So for M365, think about the usual services. So think about things like Exchange Online, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, shared mailboxes, online archiving, the ability to be able to protect those things from a single pane of glass and be able to provide the ability to be able to do searches as well as out-of-place restores is becoming very relevant. We have this conversation with a lot of customers. Why do I need a backup M365? Because you need to, right? Just because you move from Exchange on-premise, and I guarantee you when you had Exchange on-premise, you were protecting it. Now you moved it to M365 because Microsoft said it was the best thing to do. And now obviously you're thinking that, well, maybe it's protected. Well, hate to be the bearer of bad news. That is not quite the case. So you still have a responsibility to do that. And we can help with that by providing, again, an air gap strategy to be able to keep that M365 entities. And you don't have to protect every mailbox. You don't have to protect every SharePoint site or Teams site. It's very granular in allowing you to be able to provide whatever you need to do. So very simple, easy approach, user-based licensing based on consumption. Obviously, as I said, you're metered on that on a monthly basis, and then you can afford to obviously pay your bill basically as you feel, whether it's yearly, 3-yearly, 5-yearly, a lot of flexible approaches to basically doing that. But giving you visibility and compliance into an M365 environment is very compelling for a lot of customers. Talk about Google Workspace. Google Workspace, very similar. Again, Google provides an infrastructure. It obviously has the ability to do things like, for example, Gmail and Google Drive, very, very obviously robust platforms. But again, they're not providing data protection. So, typically, in most of these platforms, depends on your license. And again, this could be the same for M365 or Google Workspace. There are limits on how often you can keep the data depending on your licensing. How long do you need to archive it? Putting things into recycle bins, do they get wiped out after 30 days? What do you do in those situations? So having something like obviously Apex Backup Services to be able to keep that data for longer retentions We are using deduplication and compression as well on there. So it does allow you to keep longer retentions in the backup set. So you can have your operational recovery, obviously in M365, but using Apex Backup Services, I can have longer retention if I want to, subject to how much I want to pay for, of course. But again, having the ability to protect these assets very quickly and very easy from one single control plane is very simple and easy conversation. Salesforce, again, same principle, having the ability to back up Salesforce assets and having a very granular capability. The Salesforce capability is second to none here. We obviously have the ability to extend into Salesforce. So if you're familiar with Salesforce, things like Salesforce Lightning, you can actually have a plugin that plugs into Salesforce. So your Salesforce administrators can actually do recovery of assets right down to granular level of things like metadata. Show me this particular Salesforce attribute over the last 3 weeks. What changed? What was the record that was changed? How far do you want to be? And we can be granular that they need to do to be able to recover individual records or assets using the native Salesforce tools to be able to do that. We also have the ability to do things like sandbox seeding, which allows you to take a Salesforce environment and actually reproduce it for things like data warehousing and testing of different applications. So that's really a powerful feature that we can actually do using this functionality. So again, typically Salesforce has been a challenge to protect. Obviously there's been some approaches in the past from Salesforce where they've actually given you a CSV file of your data. That's not really ideal. This is more integrated to do that. And again, using the power of this technology to provide deduplication and long-term retention of the data outside of Salesforce is very compelling. What about endpoints? Endpoints are becoming very notorious right now. We've obviously done both CDW as well as Dell has actually done a lot of business in the last 2 years due to the pandemic and the endemic. There's obviously a lot of different things out there where, we've actually had a lot more endpoints out in the situation where we've had to sell them in the sense that, we had a lot more people working from home. And this was a very big change in mentality. Now we've got a couple of different things is how do we protect those assets? Do we need to protect those assets? Again, there is now a security vulnerability here as well from another attack vector. Could there be compromise at the endpoint and the endpoint's bringing something into your corporate environment? These are things that we can absolutely help with, no doubt. One of the big things that I see in a lot of customers now is say, yeah, we've got a lot of endpoints that are actually out there, but we don't protect them. Okay, we just re-image them and send new ones out. And we force basically the redirection, or we force people to put data into, M365 OneDrive, for example. Well, that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. But what about the ability to do things like, for example, how do you protect that M365? And most people say, well, we're not. So again, this is the same conversation that we've had prior to talk about how it can actually help you do those different things. This platform is not, again, to emphasize, it's not a full-blown MDM, so it's not a mobile device management capability. It's not going to displace something like Carbon Black, but it does have a lot of functionality to do things like geo-tracking. So you can actually get an inventory of your endpoints and see where they physically are, right down to the street level, and I can show you that today in a live environment. The ability to be able to remotely wipe those devices as well. So for things like mobile devices such as Android or iOS, I can physically wipe the device completely. Or on a Windows or a Linux laptop, I can potentially, or a Mac, I can actually wipe out the data that's being protected on that endpoint. So again, there's a lot of different things I can do, as well as federated search, as well as legal hold and compliance on those different things as well. So again, it's doing operational backup and recovery, but providing a lot of visibility in there as well. Lastly, I'll touch on hybrid workloads as well. So hybrid workloads as well as the ability to protect things that could potentially be on-premise. So think the traditional workloads such as file systems, think Windows, think Linux, for NAS capability to be able to protect those things. Now, obviously, this shifts the model somewhat from obviously shifting it from a, if you think about it from a traditional backing up and storing things on-premise, is more to, the ability to effectively go through and protect those things and send them directly to the cloud. So things like VMware, things like Hyper-V, things like Acropolis, from basically Nutanix are all considerable options. Hybrid workload supports things like high-value workloads such as Oracle, as well as SQL as well, and obviously it pretends to do that. I know what you're thinking. Obviously, this is a different change and shift in mentality, absolutely. But again, going to the cloud is a very viable option because everything we do is source-based deduplication and compressed from that perspective. And then also lastly from this is the ability to do things like on-premise recovery points. So customers will be asking questions like, well, I've got a very inefficient circuit to the internet. How can you help me with that? So we can actually use a caching technology to have on-premise to address workloads. So such as things like, for example, effectively, do you want to be able to have local recovery points? And we can support up to 30 days of local recovery points. So again, so maybe I want my VMware copies on premise for 30 days, but I'm storing them in both places. I'm storing them on premise and I'm storing them in the cloud. And I have a lot of flexibility there as well. So it helps with things like bandwidth efficiency. It helps with operational recovery because now I can do land speed recovery from those things. And it is purely a software defined capability within the platform from a licensing standpoint. So again, a lot of choice here. Again, talking about the benefits of SaaS, why it's different. Obviously, shifting from really from a capex to an opex model. Typically, like the cloud is really what most people are looking to do, and having the ability to protect different workloads, obviously from a single control plane, is becoming very compelling for our customers. So I'm going to stop the PowerPoint, obviously to give you a quick glance into a live environment to show you that, what we're showing you is not snake oil. This stuff actually does exist, and show you some of the realities of the platform and show you how easy it is. And then we'll obviously hand it back to open up if there are any potential questions from obviously customers. Again, thank you for joining. We appreciate that. And then obviously I know there's some administrative things from some things that obviously CDW want to share, from some prizes and some drawings, some a capability for you joining today. So let me just toggle my screen, bring up the console. I can actually hide myself in the video, and if you guys really want to stop seeing me anymore, I just go and hide. But ultimately, what I'm showing you is obviously the console into Apex Backup Services. First and foremost, from a hardening standpoint, we're obviously going to link into things like single sign-on. So we're going to use things like SAML 2.0 for obviously single sign-on capabilities. We're going to link into things like MFA, so things like, for example, Okta, or things like single logon, or things like Duo, for example, or industry stratification certifications that you can use into the platform. The platform supports one-time passwords. It also supports geofencing, so you can restrict who basically comes in from what capabilities, and I'll show you that in some of the capabilities around the ransomware recovery, mitigation of this capability. But I also have the ability to go down here and actually have role-based access as well. So role-based access is now going to allow me to have effectively the ability to go in and actually define who can do what, who can do reporting, who can do administration, who can do legal hold, who can do searching, who can do things with the ransomware recovery, and you can actually go through obviously the different capabilities. So as I said, the platform supports things like, for example, devices. It talks about M365, Google Workspace, and Salesforce, and again, hybrid workloads. So I'm going to drill through a lot of these different things very quickly. As I said, this is very much a backup to cloud approach. We'll go into a little bit more detail on this, but just for the purely purposes, I am actually resided in the United States, not to be confused with my accent by any means, but I'm actually in the middle of the country here in Chicagoland area, but I'm actually using 2 geographical regions in the United States for my data. As I said, there is the ability to do Montreal, we'll show you that, and also there are abilities to actually have different regions. So you can have multiple regions greenlit and enabled basically through the same tenancy. So just really kind of quick to go through a couple of different things. What do you want to protect from an asset standpoint? So start off with endpoints to show you how quick and easy this is. Endpoints do require agents, so they can be pushed. They can be obviously configured and automatically deployed out as well. But you can see, we're actually protecting different endpoints in the environment. Again, these can be anything from as simple as Windows, so anything from Windows 8 through Windows 11. We obviously support Mac, so anything through Monterey, which is is OS 12. Linux has different distributions in RPM and Debian formats, and then Android and iOS devices. So you can actually define devices, you can define backup policies to do different things. So for example, if I wanted to look at this particular Windows desktop, you can see here that it's backed up. One of the things that happens in this platform is we can push out client versions and agents out here as well. You can see this is actually the latest version. I can actually see all the backups or the recovery points that I actually have listed for this device. One of the things that, again, kind of gets into the ransomware and risk mitigation is that you can see here that my recovery points are actually immutable by design. So although I'm logged in as an administrator, I can make recovery points immutable, and I can also quarantine things as well. So if I think there's something malicious, and we'll talk about that a little bit about that, the ability to quarantine things to stop them from being repaved and brought on premise is very relevant. You can set things like obviously what I protect, how I protect it, how often I protect it. I can absolutely do that. And then lastly, as I said, you do have the capability to do data loss prevention. So again, not to go into too much detail, but this actual laptop is actually in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. You can see the last time it connected, which was yesterday. When I'm encrypting the device, and again, in the situation I wanted to decommission it, I could decommission the device remotely as well and centrally. So again, you have a lot of different powerful functionality in the platform. You can see my backup trending. You can see how much data is actually protected, how much data was transferred, and what my bandwidth savings and dedupe efficiency in the platform is as well over a period of time. I can actually get breakdowns of all the data types, again, media files, documents, executables, emails, and so on. And again, am I seeing high rates in change here? Am I seeing lots of backups? Am I seeing lots of restores or lots of deletions? This kind of lends itself into being aware of obviously what's going on in the environment itself. If I look at things like SaaS applications, so M365, for example, I want to be able to go in and actually look at what's going on in my environment. Again, I would actually configure my tenant into my M365 environment. I'm actually going to provide credentials to get in, but after that, we're going to lax the permissions down to not using a global admin role. A lot of competitive solutions out there do require it. This platform does not, and I have to emphasize that. What do you want to break down on? What's the data set? So I will tell you the top talkers in here typically are going to be OneDrive and SharePoint. You are going to get some things in Exchange Online. You can then enable obviously what you want to protect. So again, Exchange Online. This is a very small demo environment, but you can see we've got 22 mailboxes, a shared mailbox, and a resource mailbox. So we can get into these if you would like. Public folders, SharePoint, and Teams. So again, I have the ability to actually import Active Directories. So Active Directories can come from Azure AD, they can come from AD on-premise, but it's a synchronization. So we're actually leveraging user mailboxes against actually Active Directory credentials. So just to go down and show you a couple of different things in here, I actually have an end user account. It has absolutely nothing to do with my admin account here. These are completely two separate entities, but I can actually go into my end user account and I can see the different data sets that I'm protecting. I'm backing up several Windows devices, a Linux device, Exchange Online, and OneDrive. So from an admin standpoint, I can go in here and restore data. What do I want to restore? So let's say I want to restore Exchange. I can actually go into things like mail, contacts, calendars. I have the ability to drill down into there, and based on the recovery point I have, how far do I want to go back? So in the last 2 days, I've got 2 recovery points. Do I want to go back older? Do I want to go back as far as I want, depending on how much I want to pay for in this platform? You can see I can go all the way back to 2020 here. But the nice thing about it is I can actually click on an email, I can restore it, I can go back to the same user account, I can actually put it back to a different user account. And again, using Active Directory, I can simply type in someone else's name and it will resolve by name, and I can actually restore that to an individual user. The other use case in here is actually, as I said earlier, to be able to do out of place restores. What if I want that email out of there and not go back to M365? So maybe I want to basically put it down to a PST file, and that PST file will come locally down to me. So again, lots of different options in here to address M365. You have the ability to go in here and protect OneDrive. You have the ability to protect groups. So these are groups inside M365, public folders, SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive as well. So again, you actually have the ability to go down into any of these sites. You can actually go down into restoring data. So again, what does the recovery look like? And I can actually go down to doing things at a granular level recovery inside those sites and those channels, and effectively go in and see what it was in there from a conversation or a file or a wiki, or in fact, restore the whole full team site. So there's a lot of powerful things you can do, obviously, from an M365 standpoint. It looks very similar to Google Workspace, looks very similar to Salesforce. And then obviously, as I said, you've got the powerful functionality, such as things like federated search. So I can actually go through the platform and say, hey, give me a list of all the PDF documents, for example, that are in here. So I can search by extension, for example, define PDF in there from an attribute, and actually do a quick search So again, gives me the intelligence to do things like powerful intelligence to see these PDF files are here. Maybe there's some things in here that I'm not sure that shouldn't be here. I have the ability to quarantine them so they can't be repaved or restored. I have the ability to delete them to address things like GDPR, or I can even email the results out to having the ability to do that. Again, you can do things like sensitive data governance, looking for different things. So in my example here, I've actually have a policy that's looking for social security numbers, very prevalent to obviously the United States. You can see I'm the top offender, surprise, surprise. And inside here, there's under the file violations, there's a document sitting in my OneDrive folder is actually quarantined right now. And I can actually look at that document and say, okay, what captured that information? So again, I had the ability to actually find that social security number inside that document. I have the ability to have my own sensitive data. These are all pre-built inside here. So again, you can actually look at things like email addresses that I'm looking for, or whether I'm looking for passports or credit card numbers or whatever I need. And of course, I have the ability to create my own sensitive data in here as well. So just talking on a couple of different things and being conscious of the time that we have here today. Happy to go into obviously a lot of different things, but obviously just to give you a drill down of how this product works in the sense that you obviously have the capability to get in a little bit further detail. So again, having the ability to support different geographical regions to actually land my data is very compelling. So again, obviously, as I said to you earlier, you have the ability to keep sovereignty and keep the data in Canada. Obviously where you guys are at. So again, you can absolutely keep that. So again, but you have, if you had facilities that you were managing in, let's say UK, or basically in, for example, Europe, or even in basically Central Europe, or even into APJ right down to South America, or over to Australia, you obviously have the ability to choose the data regions, and you're not precluding to one. It's obviously just basically to precluded to be able to greenlight whatever you want to do. One of the big things that's very different around the hybrid workloads in the platform is, again, I touched on earlier, having the ability to do deduplication and compression. So in this lab is about 22 terabytes worth of data that we're protecting, but you can see here after deduplication, I'm protecting that in 6 terabytes of storage. Well, guess what? That is what you're consuming. That is what you're paying for basically hybrid workloads. For M365 and laptops, you're based on a seat licensing that comes with storage. But for the hybrid, we're charging this on a consumption model, not the front end. So I know that's kind of different for a lot of folks. But again, that is based on a kind of monthly build or measured attribute, excuse me, for want of a better word, and obviously build accordingly based on what your consumption is. What do I want to protect? So again, I have the ability to go in and get information around protecting things like SQL servers, file servers, NAS, Hyper-V, VMware. So I can simply go through and protect those different things. So being as simple as something like VMware, you can actually go in and register your vCenter environment. You would have a data mover, which will be available to you from a download section here. We don't charge for these. These are all included in the platform. You obviously would go through here, typically from capability. You can configure the VMs to be configured for backup. You have the ability to do those kind of capabilities. And then obviously having the ability to do different levels of recovery. So we are doing things like, for example, change rate monitoring, everything is source-based deduplication as well. And then from a restore standpoint, do I want to do things like maybe a VMware level restore, VMDK, files and folders, whole VMs, or if I'm basically using SQL embedded, I can do SQL independent level recoveries. Or if I'm using the caching technology I touched on earlier, I have the ability to do instant access or instant restore, which injects the cached copy locally directly into ESX to provide fast recoverable capabilities. But that said, there's a lot of different things in here. Obviously, we want to be cognizant of our time today on a couple of different things, and there are a couple of things I want to cover just last minute to give you around some visibility into the platform itself. But again, you can see how simple and easy this is. I haven't had to install anything. I've just had to configure my data sets and my workloads around it. But one of the things I do want to touch on, which is very prevalent to this, is actually getting some things. Obviously, there's things like analytics and things. But ransomware is becoming a very huge conversational point around how you do with different things. And from a ransomware functionality, this is a licensable feature for the platform, but it does allow you to do visibility and compliance into the environment. Yes, you're backing up to the cloud. Yeah, you want some visibility. So this is how we're going to show you this. So from a fundamental aspects of this, I have the ability to get information to this. One of the things I haven't touched on is how you get data to this platform. So to get data to this platform, there are only three ways. There's actually data access, which would be the data mover. So if it's an agent or an API or a proxy to move the data, you're obviously going to be logging those data access. Who did what? Where did they log in? What resource did they actually use? Where did they come in from? What was the IP address? So again, you get geographical presence to be able to be alerted. So not to get political by any means today, but ultimately, if I suddenly went into my admin login in here and I saw some very strange locations that had a lot of success or failure rates, these are normal for my environment because I know the environment. But again, if I had some activity that was coming in from this region right now from the world, I'd probably be a little bit questionable about what was going on. And I can see here that I can restrict these addresses, of course, to be able to see who can do what and where it can come in from. But I had the ability to look through data access, logging in the console, as well as API requests using the REST API. So again, giving the visibility to do that. I have the ability to get an activity to going in here. What resources are quarantined? Have I seen some capabilities? So what we can do on egress, this is a number one ask from a lot of customers is ultimately, are you scanning everything on ingest? Well, no vendor in the world is going to scan data for malware or ransomware on ingest because your backup windows will be absolutely huge. But what we're doing is we're doing, obviously the ability to scan data on egress. So again, you have the ability to scan for several different things. There is an antivirus engine that is built into the platform, something else you don't have to maintain. Again, the advantage of having a SaaS-based application. You can actually turn that on or off. You can actually use your own hash scan, so SHA-1 hash database. So you can add your own, or you can import. So maybe you're subscribing to something like CrowdStrike. So you can bring those in through APIs if you want. And we can scan those on basically recovery. So again, you can see here there were some files as on restore. So for example, I look at this particular laptop here. We did a restore of the data. And as I restored the data, it was scanned for SHA-1 hashes, as well as obviously, viruses. So I knew it was clean. We knew the file came down clean. And again, to give you some value add. If I do see some things around activity, so again, the platform is looking for unusual data activity. I can set that out to the last 30 days to show some things. And we were invoking some unusual data activity in here. You can see that there was some actually creation. We actually created additional 5,000 files just to prove a point. You can see here for some servers, there were some actually things that were creation. So things like creation, deletions, things like encryption are the attributes that we're actually looking for, obviously in the basically the malicious file scan capabilities here as well. We also have the ability to create clean reference points as well, which we call curated snapshots. Allows you to take a date range and create a date range so that I can say between these particular date ranges. One of the big things around the capabilities for a lot of different things is, for example, let's choose a NAS or a file server, for example, and show me all my entities, and I can say this particular server here. I want about the ability to create a date range. So typically from a compromise standpoint, you look at it from how far do I want to go back if I was compromised? Yes, there's some things it's going to tell you here, but obviously there's some things you're going to know about what's going on. But I could go back, say, for the last basically 2 days and say, create me a new recovery point that's clean based on SHA-1 values and antiviruses. They will give me clean. And also I know that, say, for example, there was a bunch of files that say were PPT files, for example, and they renamed it to PPT2 and suddenly were encrypted. I can exclude those from the clean recovery point. So what the principle of this platform really is giving is the ability to do really the focus of to be able to get data back quickly on premise from a recovery point that is clean, right? And again, helping with the assistance of that. So again, there's a lot of functionality in this platform, as I said, to go through different activities to give you, things like, for example, on user data activity, looking for scanning and intelligence. But again, the platform is really geared around operational recovery, but a lot of different things are based on the behavior of the platform, giving you visibility, full audit trails in the platform, of course. And then, as I said, this is a completely managed service, obviously soup to nuts, in the sense that, again, you don't have to provision anything. We provision everything for you. You can control the operational side of things. But really, from a security standpoint, there is no traditional protocol access like FTP and RDP and SSH. You don't have access to that in any shape or form. and obviously gives you the obviously the ability to go through this from an environmental standpoint, just to give you the aspects of really operational. So again, whether this is, you know, endpoints, SaaS applications, or physical hybrid workloads, you have the ability to be able to protect using a SaaS-based control plane, and obviously giving you visibility and compliance. So that's all I basically wanted to cover for my content today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I obviously appreciate everybody joining today. I'm going to hand it back to my co-host here from CDW, and thank them again for the opportunity, and thank you, the customers, for coming in today. So I appreciate the time. I'm here for any other further questions, but hopefully this gives you a better understanding about what we're doing here with Apex Backup Services.
Thank you so much, Paul. Awesome and very timely topic, and great presentation, just to giving our customers that insight into how to protect that, like as I said, the most valuable asset that the business has, which is their data. With that, we're going to open it up for any questions that you may have of Paul and the Dell team. Anything you're curious about? Go ahead and bring yourself off mute. Questions out there? Is there anything in the chat? Or moderators, anyone see anything in the chat?
I don't see any questions in the chat, Krim.
No, we're good there. Okay, awesome. All right, with that, just a quick announcement. So I believe we have, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are some giveaways that we have. There's going to be a raffle for $100 Sport Check gift card to, I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, is 20 people? If I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
20.
Excellent. And also, one lucky person will get a Dell Ultra Sharp webcam. So the draw will happen on Monday, and I believe you will be reached out to by our team. You know, if you're one of the winners. With that, I want to once again thank you very much for your time. You know, spending the time with us to learn about these solutions. If you have questions, if if something pops into your mind later on, please reach out to the Dell team. Please reach out to the CDW team or your account representatives, and we will be more than happy to get back to you and help you through your data protection journey. With that, I want to thank you all very much and have a great day. And by the way, any last words from our PPM team? Hey there, Rochelle, Megan.
No, I think that's everything. Thanks so much for attending. Yeah, thanks, Krim. Thank you, Paul, and the rest of the Dell team. Everyone have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.